Out of his front door. Let's listen to the Prime Minister of Canada.
From coast to coast to coast, there are Canadians working long hours to keep each other safe and keep our country moving. But for everyone putting in an extra shift right now, there's someone else who wants to work but can't. Maybe you've been laid off because of the pandemic. Maybe you still have a job but aren't sure if your employer is going to keep you around next month. Whatever your situation may be, we're in your corner. Earlier this month, we introduced the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to help protect your job or help you get back to work. And as of this morning, applications for this program have opened. Employers can now submit a claim for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy through the Canada Revenue Agency. To access the 75% wage subsidy for your employees, go online through canada.ca to reach this portal. Whether you're a charity that employs 200 people or a fast-growing startup that employs just 20, you will be eligible to up to $847 per week per employee. And you can expect to see this money soon. The CRA has partnered with financial institutions, so make sure you register for direct deposit to get your money quickly. The first payments should begin to arrive on May the 7th. For organizations like Focus on Nature, who sent me a letter last week, that's huge. Because of COVID-19, this charity from Guelph would have been forced to lay off all of their staff. But thanks to the wage subsidy, they can now keep their employees on the payroll and keep teaching kids about nature. And there are so many more stories, just like this one. There have been over 300,000 views of the online calculator we launched last week to help businesses prepare a claim. And since the portal opened at 6 a.m. this morning, almost 10,000 businesses have already applied for it. That gives you a sense of just how many people this program will help. Right across the country, it's going to keep businesses and workers connected. And that gives people certainty that they'll have a job now and in the months to come to support themselves and their family. And it means employers will not just have the help to stay afloat through the tough time, but they'll be ready to gear back up when things get better. We all know a local salon or a gym that's had to close, a neighborhood restaurant or shop that's really struggling. And more importantly, we all know people who work there. They deserve a hand to get through this, and that's what the wage subsidy is for. Depuis ce matin,
starting this morning, employers are able to apply to receive the emergency wage subsidy on the Canada Revenue Agency website. You will find the portal online at canada.ca, and there you can apply for your 75% subsidy. Whether you're running a charity that employs 200 people or a startup that employs 20 people, you can now receive up to $847 per employee every week. And this is money that you will be receiving soon. The Revenue Agency has been working with financial institutions to ensure that you can quickly receive your payments if you opt for direct deposit, with the first payments becoming available on May 7th. Since 6 a.m., almost 10,000 businesses have already applied. This subsidy will help many people keep their job during this crisis, and it will also help employers to quickly start up their activities again once the crisis has ended. All of us have in our neighborhood either a hair salon or a gym that has had to shut down, or a neighborhood restaurant or small boutique that's having trouble. And we all know people who work in those places. They deserve a hand to get through this, and that is the whole purpose of the wage subsidy. But certainly, a single program cannot help everyone. If your employer cannot rehire you, if you are a seasonal worker, or if you cannot find a job right now, we will help you. You have probably already received your first monthly check for the emergency benefit. If you need one next month, you simply have to go online and confirm that you are still eligible. But remember, you cannot keep both the wage subsidy and the emergency benefit. It's one or the other, not both. Now, we are working with other parties now to pass legislation that will allow us to introduce the measures that we have developed for students. We will be continuing this work in Parliament, and our first virtual session will take place tomorrow with an in-person session on Wednesday. At the same time, we will also be giving the provinces and territories the funding they need to top up the wages of essential workers. They're doing an amazing job, and they deserve to be fairly compensated.
People are facing different challenges right now, and no single program can reach everyone. So we're coming at this from every angle. If your employer can't hire you back, if you're a seasonal worker, if you can't find a job right now, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit is there for you. You've probably already received your first check. And if you need the help again for the coming month, go online and reconfirm that you're still eligible. And I want to remind everyone, you won't be able to keep both the wage subsidy and the CERB. It's one or the other, not both. If you're a student, there's support for you, too. Right now, we're working with the other parties on legislation to get this help flowing. Parliament will have its first virtual sitting tomorrow and an in-person sitting on Wednesday. And if you're an essential worker, you deserve to be paid properly for your incredible work. Our government is doing its part to make that happen. Ontario came out with their plan over the weekend, and we're working with them to provide the support they need to deliver results. And we're currently in discussion with all the other provinces and territories to get their plans for essential workers in place. I'll have more updates for across the country in the coming days. As I said Saturday, we're also collaborating on shared guidelines for reopening the economy once the time comes. Different provinces and territories will be able to move at a different pace, but we need clear, coordinated efforts from coast to coast to coast. And no matter where you live, you need to continue following the recommendations from public health officials that will keep everyone safe. Comme j'ai dit,
as I said, we are also working with the provinces and territories with a view to gradually reopening the economy. Every province and every territory has a different reality, but we must work together to ensure the safety of all Canadians. We are all very anxious to return to a normal life, but we have to do that right. Otherwise, we risk losing all the progress we've made thus far. So you know what to do. Stay home. Continue to wash your hands frequently, and if you have to go out, keep a 2-meter distance from you and others. Every day, we get closer to the time when all of this will be behind us. We get closer to the time when we can all celebrate together, but we are not there yet. Let's persevere together, friends. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période de questions par le téléphone aujourd'hui. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous.
Good morning, Prime Minister. With respect to reopening the economy, you just referred to that. Now, if there are variations between regions and between provinces, do you believe that the Emergency Measures Act is something you should consider to avoid unnecessary travel or maybe shutting down the borders between provinces? Well, as I've said before, I hope I won't need to do that, and I don't think I will at this point in time. People are currently following, or the majority of people are following, the recommendations of our healthcare experts and their provincial authorities. They're limiting their travel, they're staying home, and I think people know that it's very risky to start up regular activities too quickly, because then we could lose all the progress that we made with such difficulty in recent weeks. So we must be careful, and I think Canadians know that. I believe that we have the necessary tools to ensure that things will work as they should.
As I've said from the beginning, I'm loath to use the Emergency Measures Act, and up until this point, it has not been necessary. I think people have been following the guidelines, instructions of public health officials, of provincial and federal instructions. People have been doing the things necessary to keep themselves safe, to keep their neighbors safe, to keep health workers safe, to limit their movements. We have measures in place that people are following. As we reopen gradually, I'm certain people will want to follow these measures, because if we get this wrong, everything we have done, everything we have sacrificed over the past many weeks could have been in vain. We need to make sure we do this very carefully, based on absolutely the best scientific advice.
En suivi?
Follow up. Did you see or approve the plans that will be unveiled by Quebec and Ontario today? And could you give us some clear examples of the type of guidelines that people would have to follow? For example, installing plexiglass to protect their employees. Can you give us concrete examples of the type of measures you're looking at? Well, first of all, it's not up to the federal government to approve the measures that fall within provincial jurisdiction. We respect the authority of the provinces to make the appropriate decisions for their own citizens. And as you know full well, from one industry to the next, from one region to the next, the measures will be different to keep people safe. Now, what we are developing in partnership with the provinces is a series of essential principles, things like you have to ensure that we have enough testing capacity to reopen the economy. You must ensure that there are specific conditions in place for certain industries or economic sectors that you're planning to open. Those are principles we need to follow, but the provinces have the right and the obligation to put forward specific things that work for them.
The provinces have the authority to determine what is in their best interest. It's not up to the federal government to check or oversee the provinces in their areas of jurisdiction, and much of this falls within their areas of jurisdiction. They have the responsibility to do what is right for their citizens. Every province is in different situations. Regions within the provinces are in different situations, and I have full confidence in the premiers of the provinces and the territories to move forward in a way that is right for them. What we've been working on with the provinces is a set of guidelines and principles that can inform the decision makers in each region. Things like make sure that you have enough medical capacity to handle a potential surge. Make sure you're doing enough testing for your situation and have a plan to do more. Make sure that there are specific guidelines in place for specific sectors or industries that are appropriate to keep people safe. It's not up to the federal government to determine what those are. We have tremendous confidence in the provinces, who very much want to make sure that this happens the right way and that we don't fall back into another phase like we're in this time as we gradually open up.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Mia Rabson, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Good morning. You already mentioned that the CERB and the wage subsidy can't both be received by people. How do you see them sort of complementing each other or working together? And are you not worried that workers are sort of going to be caught in the middle and many of them are going to end up having to pay one or the other of them back?
They are the wage subsidy and the CERB are designed to support workers, to support people who've lost their paychecks. For someone who's lost their job, whose employers can't hire them back with the wage subsidy, the CERB is there to give them $500 a week, $2,000 a month, so that they can pay for their groceries and make through this tough time while they're not receiving any sort of paycheck. But we also realized that it is really important for restoring our economic activity to full potential as quickly as possible that ideally people stay connected to their jobs, that they stay connected with their employers. And that's why we're facilitating a wage subsidy up to 75%, that is up to $847 a week, that will go through the employers so that people can stay on the payroll and stay connected to their job so they have confidence that they'll have that job when we have time, when we're at the time to come back as an economy. These are two different measures that aim to do the same sorts of things, make sure families and workers are able to make it through this time while doing the right things to keep themselves safe and to make sure our economy comes back strong. But it is one or the other. Because of the uncertainty, because of the application process, it is possible that people will have received both the CERB and the wage subsidy. In that case, they will have to, over the course of the coming months, pay one of them back. So people should keep that in mind, that if you're getting both, you should probably put one of them aside so that you can pay that back and you don't get overly challenged with that down the road. But we recognize that getting money out to people quickly and strongly, reliably, was the most important thing, and that's what we did. We'll figure out the next steps as we go and make sure that it's fair for everyone. Nous avions créé deux programmes pour aider ceux qui ont perdu un chèque de paie. D'abord, la prestation canadienne universelle qui donne
emergency response benefit that gives people $2,000 a month if they have lost their job. Now, we also know that ideally people would be able to keep their job in order to be able to return once the economy is fired up again. And that way they could retain their job attachment. And that's why we brought in the wage subsidy. We are going to be providing up to 75% of employees' wages to employers so that they can continue to pay up to $847 a week to their employees. And that way, when the economy reopens, people will still have that job attachment and will know that they can return to work. So those two measures mean that it's one or the other. Now, with the emergency benefit, some people may end up receiving both, but in that case, they will have to probably repay the emergency response benefit if they've received both. So put that money aside and we'll resolve that in the future. But for now, we decided it was important to get that money out to people safely and quickly, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, do you envision then that many of the people who've already started applying for and receiving the CERB will suddenly be transferred over to the wage subsidy? And is that not very complicated? And are there sort of things within the program to try and prevent double payments so that there isn't confusion about who has to pay what back?
The government agencies have a clear record of who gets what that will obviously help in sorting this out in the coming months. The wage subsidy is retroactive to March 15th, but as of the date that the CERB came in, a number of people didn't know if or whether they were going to get an eventual wage subsidy, and so applied for it. The CERB is coming up on a reapplication moment, and if people are receiving that wage subsidy, they shouldn't reapply for the CERB, the emergency response benefit. It is a situation that is complex, but it is administered by different processes within government that are clear to keep separate. If you apply through your employer if the employer applies for the wage subsidy, that money will flow for you, and you no longer need to apply for the CERB. You no longer qualify for the CERB. Okay.
This is a situation where we wanted to ensure that people would receive money quickly, and that's why we introduced the emergency response benefit. But as people receive the wage subsidy, they will no longer need the CERB and will no longer apply to receive that benefit. And we have robust systems in government to determine who received what and who received both benefits. In that case, they will have to repay one. But for the time being, we decided that it was more important to get more money out to more people in this crisis because we know that people need support. We knew that we had to make choices, and the choice to send more money out to people quickly was, in my opinion, the right choice for the economy, and we will figure out the next steps together in terms of repayment.
Merci beaucoup. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur
Good
Trudeau.
morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to my colleague's question from TVA about the relaxation of lockdown. In Quebec, they've talked about herd immunity to facilitate the reopening of schools. Now, some people have serious doubts about that concept, including Dr. Tam. Do you believe that the reopening of schools in Quebec would be premature? Now, there are still many questions about herd immunity or even individual immunity. There is no evidence that people who have been infected by the virus will not be able to become infected a few months later. This is too new a virus to have access to that information. So that's why we are encouraging people to be very careful in reopening the economy. And it's also the reason why we introduced an immunity task force on COVID-19. This is a task force that will be based in Montreal, as a matter of fact, and they will be doing the necessary research to get a better understanding of the immunity aspect of things and how we can use that to protect Canadians. But this is a mid to long-term project. For the time being, we have to be very careful, and I know that all the provinces are now being very careful about reopening the economy in the right way, because we do not want a setback.
We know that there is still a lot of uncertainty around the science of immunity, whether or not someone who has contracted COVID-19 is protected from contracting it again a few months later. That is still uncertain. There's a lot of research and science going on that topic across the country, around the world. We launched the Pan-Canadian Task Force on Immunity from COVID-19 just last week. So we have top scientists that are going to be working extremely hard to figure out what is the reality around immunity in Canada and how we can use it to keep people safer. But this is a work that will go on. It'll have immediate results in some levels, but it'll be a medium and long-term work that needs to be done. That's why we have to be very careful and cautious every step of the way in reopening the economy, because we don't want to come back to where we are. And I have confidence that every province is taking very seriously this responsibility to be careful, because nobody wants to have gone through all this for nothing.
Follow-up? Yes, as a sub-question, you mentioned that Wednesday the Parliament will be having an in-person session. You talked about the legislation on students. Now, can we expect that legislation to be debated and passed on Wednesday? And if not, is it because there is something that's blocking? Well, it is our intention to move forward with that legislation to help students. And we over the weekend, we discussed the situation with the other parties, and we are working with them with a view to getting that legislation passed. It's an important measure, and people recognize that many students will not have any jobs this summer, and we need to support them during this period, not just so that they can pay for their groceries and rent these months, but also because we want them to stay in school and be able to pay their tuition for next year and the years after that. Looking after our young people means looking after our future, and that's what we're going to do.
Dernière question.
Oui, merci. Thank you. Next question, Cormac McSweeney, City News. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. You've been talking about federal guidelines for provinces to follow in terms of reopening their economy. We're expecting the plans from Ontario and Quebec. We've already heard plans from Saskatchewan and New Brunswick. When are you going to release the full list of federal guidelines? I know you gave some examples earlier, but the full list of federal guidelines, because, we have nearly half the provinces now releasing their plans.
We have been working with the provinces over the past weeks to develop a shared set of guidelines. These will not be federal guidelines. They will be guidelines that we agree to, all of us, the 13 premiers and the Prime Minister, all of our different orders of government, to inform ourselves going forward. It is something that is worked together to give Canadians a frame within which they can see the actions being taken in their particular regions. It is important and it is historic, the level of collaboration between provinces and territories and the federal government, and that is going to continue. So we are continuing to work on finalizing those guidelines and hope to have them out in the coming days so Canadians can see them. But I can tell you that already the thinking that has gone into building those shared guidelines with the provinces and territories is already informing the decisions that they move forward with in announcing reopening plans.
Following up, Cormac?
And just wondering as well, you've announced commercial rent relief for small businesses, medium-sized businesses across the country. And Premier Doug Ford has also called for some sort of residential rent relief. Is that on the table for the federal government? Is it in the works right now with the provinces?
We recognize that Canadians need money for an awful lot of things, particularly when they no longer have a paycheck coming in, whether it's rent, whether it's groceries, whether it's supporting their family members. That's why we move forward rapidly on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and the 75% wage subsidy that applications have launched today for. These are meant to replace income that Canadians won't have coming in over the course of this economic slowdown. And that can be used for rent, for groceries, for a range of things. If provinces in whom the relationship between renters and landlords is their jurisdiction want to move forward with more help for residential rent, they can of course do that. We will focus on giving the benefits to Canadians that will replace as much of their paychecks so that they can pay their essentials. Small businesses needed extra support for their commercial rents on top of the wage subsidy, and that's what we've done.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Brian Mullen, Global News. One of the groups still feeling isolated and vulnerable are seniors. Many have had to absorb an extra cost of delivery services on a fixed income. Others have to pay additional dispensing fees at the pharmacy. Last week you said help was coming. How much longer will seniors have to wait?
We knew that moving forward on replacing people who lost and were counting on their paychecks through COVID-19 was the priority. And that's why we move forward with the CERB and the wage subsidy, which launches today. We then recognize that students who often start their summer jobs in early May after finishing their term at post-secondary education needed help as well, which is why we're moving forward on that. Seniors are also facing a tremendous level of vulnerability because of COVID-19. It is health vulnerability, it is being isolated further, and challenges around mental health and isolation, and difficulty sometimes getting groceries and getting the supports they need. We have moved forward on a number of things to ensure that they get supports, but we're also looking at further supports specifically for the most vulnerable low-income seniors who are truly challenged.
Can you outline some of the options that you're looking at?
As I said, we're looking at things like supports for the most vulnerable seniors who are seeing extra costs because of COVID-19, and we will keep working on that and have more to say soon.
Hello, Prime Minister. Tom Parry, CBC. Municipalities have taken a big hit during the pandemic. Have you given any more thought to helping them? And if you do, how would that work with the provinces?
We continue to work with the provinces on the challenges that they're facing. We see municipalities absorbing many extra costs because of COVID-19. They are the responsibility of the provinces, of course, and we respect the constitutional division of powers in this country. But at the same time, we are looking for ways to make sure that municipalities have the necessary flexibility and tools to keep their citizens safe and to deliver necessary services. But those are conversations that we're ongoing with the provinces.
Can I ask you as well, when the economy starts to reopen gradually, you're going to have a lot of businesses that are going to be on the market for personal protective equipment. There's a high demand for it out there already. Are you making any kind of plans to deal with that?
Every single day, every week, we are ramping up our supplies of personal protective equipment. We have been ensuring that as much as possible, our healthcare workers, our frontline essential workers, get the equipment they need to keep themselves safe. But as we look at reopening the economy in different parts of the country, we know there is going to be an increased demand for personal protective equipment. That's one of the principles and guidelines we have to keep in mind as we look at reopening. Will there be enough PPE for various sectors to open up? And that's a piece of it. We are expecting to receive a shipment of PPE every day on flights from China this week. We are ramping up our domestic production capacities for personal protective equipment because we know that is going to be an important source for Canadian businesses and Canadian industry in the coming months. These are all things we're doing to make sure we can take the decisions that will gradually reopen the economy while keeping Canadians safe.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada. Sur la PCU et l'aide aux étudiants,
with respect to the emergency benefit and students, will you be making changes so that there's more of an incentive to return to work? Because right now, if you go to work and you make $1,001, you cannot receive the $2,000. So you have to work a lot more hours, and that's not really an incentive to get people back to work full-time. Employers and people are saying that this is not something that fosters a desire to return to work. What do you say about that? Now, we are right now in a lockdown because of COVID-19. There are not enough jobs out there for Canadians across the country. Yes, we are aware of the challenges in terms of an incentive to work, and we are trying to ensure that the industries that need workers will be able to secure them. But we are facing a situation where millions of Canadians cannot receive a paycheck for the work they've done, and therefore we need to support them. There just aren't enough jobs right now for Canadians. There aren't enough jobs for students. So we need to support them. That is the decision that the government had to make. But why not make it more flexible? Why not provide more flexibility so that someone can get part of the benefit, but can also go and work perhaps in a senior's home for several hours? And that way we would be encouraging people to go and work where we need them to work. Can we not have that flexibility? Well, we did reflect on that right from the beginning in terms of the right industries, the right workers, and how to proceed. But the fact is that we had to get that benefit out to people quickly so that they could pay for their rent or pay for their groceries, and particularly so that they could make the choice of staying at home and self-isolating, and thereby protecting the healthcare workers and their neighbors. If we had not provided adequate support to workers in order to replace their lost paycheck, they would have been forced to be more vulnerable in order to help their families, and that would have extended the pandemic and the crisis we're currently in. So we decided to get money out to them quickly, and I know that more than 8 million Canadians are now receiving the emergency response benefit. And we know that every element of complexity did increase the risk of not being able to get it out quickly so that people could get that support. And as a result, we decided to go forward quickly and to make things as simple as possible. And that's what we did.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Gray from CTV News. Over the last number of weeks, you've said that life will not return to normal until we get a vaccine. We asked Dr. Tam about those questions on the weekend. She said, and this is a quote, "It's very premature to comment on if we'll get a vaccine, and if we do, how effective it will be." So considering her cautious words on our ability to get a vaccine, is it still your position that life will return to normal only if we do get one?
Normal is something that is a long way off for all of us. And if we want life to get back to the way it was exactly before, it won't. There will be differences even a few years from now that we will have learned from dealing with this global pandemic that I think will be important lessons. As we move forward over the coming months, we will be able to see careful reopenings in certain sectors of the economy, certain things being allowed as people try to get back to something a little more like normal. But until we have a vaccine for COVID-19 or a system of treatments that are equivalent to a vaccine, where we can be sure that people will not, they will not have COVID-19 be as lethal as it is now, we are going to have to be very careful. That caution will remain, because at any time, if we loosen our measures too much, we could find ourselves back in a tremendous spike. Historians remember from the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic that the spring was pretty bad, but the fall was much worse. We need to stay vigilant every step of the way. And that's what we're focused on, so that this disruption to our economy, to our lives, that is difficult to go through right now, will not have been for nothing, and we will continue to keep ourselves safe for the coming months. Okay. Nous reconnaissons... Ce qui est normal va prendre longtemps.
What is a normal life will take a long time to return, and even at this point, in 2 or 3 years from now, even once a vaccine against COVID-19 is available, we will have changed our behavior. We will have taken measures as a society that will be different from what we used to do. We will continue to evolve, but we want to be able to start up certain activities in the months to come that will mean that there is some relaxation of the current lockdown, but I think we have to be very careful. Until we have a vaccine, or until we have treatments that are the equivalent of a vaccine that can keep us safe and that can allow us to not be so concerned about the spread of COVID-19, until that happens, there is still a risk that there will be a spike in the number of cases if we are not careful and if we do not follow the public health recommendations. Historians remind us that the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918 involved a very bad spring, but an absolutely disastrous fall. And that's why we must remain vigilant, and we must be very careful in order to not lose all the progress we've made thus far when it comes to limiting the spread of the virus.
And even the WHO have discussed the idea of a health passport, which would allow businesses and cities, other people, to determine, you would show whether or not you've had COVID-19. And I know you mentioned earlier that the science is still out on immunity and antibody tests, but the idea of Canadians having to show personal health information in exchange for going back to work, going back to school, is that an idea that you're comfortable with?
That is even premature to speculate about. There is no conclusive evidence right now that having contracted COVID-19 once protects you from contracting it again a few months later. This is too new a virus. Scientists are working very hard on exactly that, whether the presence of antibodies in someone will protect them from catching COVID-19 again. But we don't know that yet. That's why we have to be very, very careful, because if we make a mistake on this and allow too much loosening of our economy and of our restrictions, and we suddenly get another massive spike, it is going to be devastating, not just for our economy, but for people who will have gone through all these weeks of sacrifices and limitations for nothing. That's something we want to avoid.
It's premature to talk about passports or immunity, because we still do not know whether someone who has contracted COVID-19 is protected from contracting it several months later. There is no conclusive evidence on that. Now, one day, perhaps soon, we may know that, but that's not the case now. So it would not be prudent at this time to base our thinking on the idea of herd immunity when we don't know whether that's a reality or not.
Merci tout le monde.
Canada giving us his daily briefing today.